Welcome, everybody. My name is Tobias McFall. I'm a co-president and director with the Canada Tech Chamber of Commerce. Although we're based in Houston, we have activities in many different places, not the least of which is Dallas, Texas, also Calgary and Toronto. And although Doug McCullough and I, who'll be your moderator today, as co-presidents are based in Houston, for the first time in a year and a half, I can say I'm actually in Canada, coming to you live from the Greater Toronto area. Although today we're definitely talking about Montreal, for sure, as a tech destination. This is a first in a series that we're going to do, and there'll be more details coming to you here shortly. And I'd like to take a moment to thank the team at Montreal International and the province of Quebec for working with us to bring this to you as a web event, and soon we will be returning to in-person events starting in Houston later on this year at the Offshore Technology Conference in August. Later on this year has now become August, which is great. That's next month. A quick background about the group. We've got an advisory board, and we are made up of basically all the professionals that you would need to do business in Canada, should you be so fortunate to choose to do so, and vice versa as well. Our advisory board is made up of my firm, Weinstein Spira. I'm a cross-border tax advisor. Doug McCullough with McCullough Sudan, who's your cross-border business legal advisor. We also have BMO, Bank of Montreal, sits on our boards in both Canada and the United States. Carle International, which is your cross-border logistics. If you're moving stuff across the border and you need customs clearance and whatnot, they're a great resource on both sides of the border. Savills, which is your location once you do decide to open up a physical location somewhere. They have services on both sides of the border. Dunbar Harder, lots of places like to make it a little tricky for you to move employees and have the right types of visas. They certainly help you with that. Air Canada, you've got to get there one way or another. Although a lot of people are doing more driving these days. Air flights, including my own, were very smooth, I can tell you, from IH to YYZ. It took me longer to walk from gate 1000 to customs than it did to get through customs and my arrival screening, testing and whatnot. So, did I miss anybody, Doug?
I think it's everyone.
All right, we got everyone. And of course, our partners at the federal and provincial levels, of course, which we always enjoy working with. So the structure today is going to be a panel discussion, but before that, I'd like to introduce our representative and contact from Montreal International, Laurence.
Thank you very much, Tobias. Thank you for inviting Montreal International to actually this first edition of the Tech Series edition. Very happy to be here. So as you mentioned, my name is Laurence Fouquet. I'm the Director of Business Development, for the Americas at Montreal International. Without further ado, without explaining to you what Montreal International does into too much details, I'd like to share with you a quick video of Montreal International services and more a video about Montreal in general. So I'll just share my screen so you'll be able to see it. Okay, you let me know if it works.
Our city is unique. It buzzes with creativity. It beats to the rhythm of its own success. And we're here to make sure our metropolis, with its rich history and promising future, shines on the global stage. We are Montreal International, the investment promotion agency for Greater Montreal. We hold the keys to this region with infinite potential, opening every door to investors, entrepreneurs, organizations, professionals, and students around the world. With the strength of our network, we're here to support you in building connections, forging collaborations, and bringing your projects to life. We're here to show you all the city has to offer. From aerospace, VFX, and artificial intelligence, to video games, life sciences, and health technologies, we know our metropolis by heart, its hidden gems, its needs, and its endless possibilities. Our mission is to share with you the assets that define the region's identity, its cosmopolitan energy, its safe and open culture, its strong purchasing power, and above all, its quality of life that's known around the world. So welcome home to Montreal.
That's it. So I'm going to start this quick presentation by giving you a little bit of an overview about what's happening in Montreal. As you might know or not know, Montreal is now a leading tech hub. So that's why we're very happy to start this first edition of the Tech Series panel. And I'll be quick because we have extremely good panelists today that are going to give you much more details about the ecosystem in Montreal. So I just want to give you a small overview about what's happening in Montreal right now. So Montreal, as you might know, is a leader, actually a world leader in AI. It has the highest concentration of deep learning researchers in the world. This is mostly due, obviously, to MILA, the Montreal International, the Montreal. Wow, I'm blanking on the name, but
Institute of Learning Algorithms.
Thank you, Len. I was blanking on institute. Wow, I've said this like 100 times in my life, and today I was blanking on it. Sorry about that. Thanks, Sylvain. So because of MILA, actually, that has over 600 researchers in deep learning and reinforcement learning, Montreal has positioned itself as an AI global hub. And this is also due because of the talent pool that we have here, obviously, the ecosystem that we've constructed with a lot of companies that decided to set up shop in Montreal, but also the funding that governments, both the government of Canada and the government of Quebec, have put into creating this ecosystem. Before that, Montreal was also a top 5 hub in video games. We have a very strong ecosystem. It started in '97 when Ubisoft decided to set up shop in Montreal, and now we have a very, very complete ecosystem in Montreal. It's also a very strong hub in aerospace, obviously more traditional industry, as well as life sciences and health technologies. And over the last years, it has also become a largest VFX and animation hub in Canada, and a VFX world leader. We've also, in the past year, developed a lot of a stronger ecosystem, I'd say, in terms of fintech, financial services, electric and smart transportations, clean tech, obviously, and this is the topic of our panel today, and transportation and logistics. So why it has become a tech hub, mostly due to a booming startup ecosystem. We have in Montreal more than 30 incubators and accelerators, more than 45 co-working spaces. It's actually where we have 4 of the 5 most active VCs in Canada. There are Edge HQ, more than 286 VC deals in 2019, a little bit more now. I don't have the numbers for 2020, but maybe Sylvain, you can pitch in later. It's also the best student city in the Americas and Canada's university capital. Actually, Montreal, the greater Montreal area, has 11 university institutions and 60 colleges. It has more than 320,000 post-secondary students, including more than 200 university students. And most importantly, it has nearly 18,000 university students enrolled in IT-related programs. So this really helped create the tech ecosystem that we have in Montreal. And governments are really committed to funding the university research. This also helped a lot developing the ecosystems. We also have a renewable, reliable, and affordable energy. And I think this is a fact that is important to mention for the topic of today. We actually in Quebec generate 99.8% of our electricity through hydropower. So this means that we have very stable rates, low carbon emissions, and no pollution rights to trade. This is also a major region for tech giants to actually set up shop in Montreal because they want to take advantage of this clean energy. Finally, the last but not least, the reason we have very good tax incentives in Montreal, and many of these tax credits are refundable, meaning that a company could receive the value of its tax credits even if it has no tax payable. So it's very encouraging actually for companies that want to do R&D, for example, or that want to do software development. You can combine tax incentives and you can have basically back a cash refund of almost 50% of your investment. So this is just a general overview. I will now let the floor to our experts, and hopefully you will get to know more about what's happening in Montreal. Once again, thank you so much for the invitation. Doug, the floor is now yours.
So thank you so much for that. That was a very useful background, and part of what we wanted to do with this program was we wanted to, I guess you could say, in the situation where it's really impossible or very difficult to do international travel, we really wanted to provide an opportunity to be almost a virtual delegation, and sort of with the background that Laurence has provided for us, I kind of want to pivot now to the panel to really get a feel for what it's like to do business in Montreal, as well as what it's like for Texas companies, in particular American companies, to collaborate cross-border with companies in Quebec and Montreal. And first, I'll do this in a little bit unusual way. I'm going to let each of the panelists introduce themselves. So I want to start with Sylvain, Carle, Second Muse, and Clio Fund. So will you tell us a little bit about you're involved in a couple different roles. Will you tell us about those and give us a little bit of a background on your experience in Montreal, what the ecosystem's really like?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Doug. Really happy to be here with you all this morning. My name is Sylvain Carle. I'm a senior director at Second Muse Capital. I've been working with Second Muse for about a year now. Prior to that, I was a general partner at Real Ventures, one of those active seed funds headquartered in Montreal that Laurence outlined a bit previously. And prior to that, an entrepreneur for about 20 years with a few stints working in San Francisco, the last time for Twitter in 2012. For the last year, I went from focusing on tech startups generally more to what we call the climate economy. So the development of innovation, the R&D of innovation, and the application and the commercialization of solutions that help to decarbonize the economy, attain those goals that we've been hearing that have been set for 2030, 2040, 2050 in terms of reducing the carbon emissions. And Second Muse has been active for about 15 years now, both in open innovation and entrepreneur support in 10 different cities. So we're operating partner with a $100 million fund in Singapore to reduce plastic in the oceans. And we have several programs running in the US, notably in New York in partnership with NYSERDA. We run the Venture for Climate and the Scale for Climate program that helps entrepreneur in the case of Venture for Climate from idea to company, and in the Scale for Climate program in manufacturing. Because if you're working for the climate in clean tech for the environment, there's digitization for sure, but there's also real world material you need to work with, energy and material. So helping companies from abroad develop their offering and grow and scale for benefit both of the people and of the planet.
Just sort of a follow-up, give us a little bit of a feel for, your experience in Montreal. What, I'm sure you've done business in other cities, other mm-hmm. places. Describe the ecosystem a little bit, the talent, the developers, the entrepreneurs, as well as the investors. Paint a picture for us, if you will.
Right, for sure. interesting to track Montreal's progress on several different indicators. About 10 years ago, there was a big call for action from everyone in this ecosystem as we made for the first time the top 25 in the startup genome startup ecosystem ranking, and understanding what were some of the key assets that we had and where could we improve quickly. And what was interesting is that in terms of research, so the intellectual capital is amazing. We're talking about investment is flowing, but really commercialization and the international development was not a strong feature. So the Quebec economy sometimes live in its own, its independent network. So this idea of connecting more broadly, globally, was seen as something really important 10 years ago. But it was coupled with a high level of ambition. So when Startup Genome tracked the global ambition of the entrepreneurs in the ecosystem, the ambition was there. So it was more a question of how do we equip ourselves to better work on the international scene. And the last thing that is pretty unique, I thought in the beginning of my career that this was the case everywhere, but the spirit of collaboration that you find in Montreal is pretty unique. So this openness, this sharing of ideas and betterment, I would say, social progress is another way to say that, but also technological progress and innovation is something that happens more collaboratively, more as a team sport than a solo sport here in Montreal.
Next, I'd like to introduce Jean-Simon Van, Brainbox AI, and really ask you the same questions. Tell us a little bit about your company, but also, tell us a little bit about your experience and your impressions of the ecosystem in Montreal.
Yeah, absolutely, Doug. So I'm the CTO and the founder of Brainbox AI. And if Brainbox AI is having success today, it's because of the Montreal ecosystem that Sylvain described. So that creativity and that collaboration that Sylvain kind of outlined is really kind of a fascinating thing, because you have all of these universities. So we have a lot of them in Montreal. They're close proximity, right? Geographically speaking, they're all within the city. But at the same time is that collaboration. So you could do like a co-research with let's say McGill and Polytechnic at the same time, and they will collaborate together. And that's something you don't see everywhere in the world, where there's kind of a rivalry in place between university. In Montreal, people have absolutely no problem to work together, even though they're different target in terms of objective as university framework, if you want. So Brainbox, we managed to build that technology that I'm going to describe very briefly, but we built it really through co-research. So we did co-research with pretty much all of the university in Montreal, different co-research, right? Different component that we kind of outsourced through co-research with the university. And then we brought everything back together, but with the university contribution. So they were not just doing a piece, but they were contributing to the building of the assembling of the technology at the end, which is very, very interesting to see in action as a dynamic. So what have we done? Where we combine two very strong technology base of Montreal, which is the deep learning, very, very strong. Yeah, Mila, over 1,000 PhD in deep learning. So we combine that expertise with the optimization compound, which is also like over the last 50 years. And I remember when I was studying back in the 80s at Polytechnic, I mean, Polytechnic was already a leader in terms of operational research optimization. We didn't have the tool computer-wise to do a lot of things. We were trying, right? Now we have the tool. But look at like what happened in the last 10 years. We finally have the computing power to do all the things that we were dreaming of doing in the 80s on the operational research optimization front. But then you combine that with the deep learning, and you're starting to have very powerful technology. And that's what we've done. We've done that for basically the building operation. So we're asking the AI to predict what will be happening with the building operation for the next few hours. And then we're asking the operational research to optimize it. So give me a better control strategy that I could operate that building in a better strategy to meet multi-objective optimization. And that's very the important aspect here is like, we're not trying to do one thing, we're trying to, similar than a video game, and kind of going into where Montreal is very strong in video game, we're trying to win that game on multi-objective, and we want to reduce the cost for the owner or the operator of the building, because that's, that's the business model. Customer will pay for this technology because it's bringing benefit. But we want to increase the comfort for the tenant at the same time that we're saving money for the owner, and we want to save the planet, which is reducing the emission. So we're managing to basically improve the comfort by reducing these events, which is a bit too cold, too hot in the building, by half. We're managing to reduce the energy bill by 25%, and we're cutting down the emission by half. And when you look at the objective of what we're trying to obtain in the next 10 years in terms of a carbon neutral type of strategy, reducing by half your carbon emission on the building side is really giving you the possibility to attain that goal. And surprisingly, one of the states where we have many deployment done, and right now the technology working, is in Texas. So we were actually a bit surprised by that, because we were expecting, maybe to be California being our blockbuster state, but no, it's Texas. So Texas right now, in Dallas and Houston, many buildings are operating with our technology, and we're cutting down emission by a big factor.
Well, thank you for a nice segue to introduction for Juliana Garaizar of Greentown Labs. Juliana, you're based here, I believe, in Houston. And we're traditionally sort of seen, well, we like to say that we're the energy capital of the world. We're very much have traditionally been an oil and gas town, but we constantly hear now the term energy transition. And Sylvain made a comment before we started recording about how when it comes to climate change, we're on one planet and that we all need to be collaborating. And sort of with that in mind, tell us a little bit about your background, what you're doing now at Greentown Labs, and particularly with an eye towards what are you seeing in terms of that global collaboration, the interest in climate action, technologies related to climate action. I'll let you speak to that.
Definitely. So yeah, I'm originally from Spain, although I started my career in Singapore, working for the Spanish Trade Commission and then Citi. Then I gravitated towards VC and angel investing after doing my MBA in London, and I run an angel group and their funds in Sofia Antipolis in the French Riviera. And 11 years ago, I moved to Houston, just because my husband works for Shell very easily, but I was very lucky to run the Houston Angel Network. We became the most active angel network in the US with several funds. Then I run the Texas Medical Center Venture Fund and a few funds that I'm still running for mainly women and minorities called Portfolio. And about over a year ago, I was recruited to lead the expansion of Greentown Labs to Houston. So for those who don't know about Greentown Labs is the biggest climate tech incubator in the US. They're based out of Boston, Somerville, Massachusetts, and they have a campus of 3 buildings there, 100,000 square feet. Over 10 years of incubating more than 330 companies. And those companies have raised more than 1 billion, created more than 6,000 jobs and 1.6 billion in terms of economic development. So when the mayor of Houston asked us to do our first ever expansion, he thought it would be the perfect place to do it because he really thought we could catalyze the energy transition in Houston by moving Greentown Labs in. So that's that, and the fact that there was a burgeoning ecosystem for climate tech companies. Also the fact that many of our corporate sponsors, or what we call corporate partners, had a very strong presence in Houston, made really the trifecta for us to expand to Houston. So we decided to expand over 2 years ago at Sarah Week, actually. We were on stealth mode till last year, and finally, we had a building that grand opened on Earth Day, April 22nd this year. And now we have 41 companies at Greentown Houston. And actually one of them is Canadian, Terrapin Geothermics. And we have basically been very lucky. All of our companies have a very global outlook. Some of them are not even based out of Houston. As I mentioned, we have the companies that are actually in Austin. Another one that is based out of Dallas and has a very strong presence in Australia. And they just want to connect with the Houston ecosystem. And I think the Houston ecosystem is also very unique because you have, I think, a lot of talent. You know, we are one of the engineering capitals of the world. We tackle the biggest problems that we have, not only climate change, but also with our medical center, which is the biggest in the world, anything that has to do with cancer. Of course, we have NASA tackling going to Mars and every other challenge that we have for survival in space. And basically we thought that if we want to stay relevant as what we used to be, the energy capital of the world or the oil and gas capital of the world, we need to start transitioning. And I really feel that since we started coming to Houston 2 years ago till we did our grand opening, we've seen a huge shift in mentality. Before, we couldn't even talk about climate change in some areas in Houston. And now everybody realizes that basically we're going to miss the train and transition is going to happen. The big question is Houston going to be part of it or not? And I believe that everybody is realizing that this is a huge opportunity for us. Oil and gas jobs are leaving. And, you know, it's up to us to figure out whether, you know, we can transition those jobs and create the technologies that are going to be able to not only make Houston thrive, but also grow in this energy transition. Houston is not only the most diverse city in the US, which is, I think, one of our greatest assets, but is also second to Washington, the one that has the most consulates and embassies and basically anything that has to do with international expansion. We are the gateway, one of the gateways to Latin America, and we really believe that we could be a great landing pad for many of our companies into the US. And that's what's happening not only with many Canadian companies that decided to have Greentown Labs as their first landing pad, but many other companies that really use not only Greentown Labs, but Houston as a place to start in the US because they have access not only to great cost of living, great talent, but also most of the customers they want to access to are actually based in Houston for pilots and CVCs and the like. So definitely very global outlook. And as you mentioned, climate change can only be solved with a very global outlook like the one you have in Montreal. So I think we have a lot of similarities going on.
Thank you for that. And Sylvain made a comment about being Montreal having a real collaborative environment. Have you all talk about that a little bit? Because, you know, one of the motivations for having this series was sort of looking at how there's been a bit of a trend of companies expanding out of the Silicon Valley or moving out of the Silicon Valley in some cases. In Texas, I know we've had Tesla, HP, and Oracle. And so there is, and you look at what happened with the whole Amazon HQ2, where every city was competing, trying to bring in a large employer such as this. But I kind of want your perspective. I know this is a little bit more of a soft topic, if you will, but, you know, talk about whether, obviously there's going to be some element of competition with these, trying to attract these jobs, but also maybe some of these cities outside of the Silicon Valley. I think there probably is a real opportunity to collaborate so that there is more than just a local ecosystem, but an ecosystem, and particularly in this case, that might be cross-border. Sylvain, you're nodding, so I'll let you take the first shot at answering that.
Right. There's the more you learn about a specific topic or the harder the challenge or the bigger the problem, the faster you realize that you can't solve everything on your own, right? Complex system changes require different stakeholders, different perspectives. And this idea that you're going to find one silver bullet that's going to solve everything, no one believes in that anymore. So I think the mindset of the general population is at this place. I think the second one, 10 years ago, there was a bunch of investment in the future of work. what does the future of work really mean? It's the digitization of the different sectors. And when we talk about climate, it's a bit confusing because we're talking about several different facets, right? Several different sectors. But really what we're looking at is what are some of the innovations? What are the innovations that will give us positive environmental impact? And this is a cross-sector challenge. So this idea of co-designing, of having stakeholders from different perspectives or from different sectors working together, co-creating or collaborating on solutions that are more holistic. You have to be doing that. That being said, it's harder, right? So it's more work, more coordination, more communication. So we have to practice on smaller projects often, and we've seen that in the last few years. So mega projects might work, but often I have a background in IT, so I like to say that Unix is an operating system where you have a series of small programs that work together to create something complex. There's more chances of this being successful than doing the mega solution, and then you take a lot of money, a lot of time, it's late, and it doesn't really work, right? So this approach of collaborating on smaller aspects, but progressing and advancing, but also measuring. So I think that's why I think Montreal has such a tremendous advantage in terms of the AI and the big data knowledge that we have here, is that you manage what you measure. And if we want to decarbonize, if we want to find the right pathways for the right carbon emission avoidance or reduction, you have to be measuring your progress. And I think that's something we need to be doing collectively. And I'll end with that before leaving it to others. But similarly to the way we've been tracking COVID infection rate and death and vaccination progress, well, I'd love to see the same for climate. And we have an opportunity. We have COP26 coming before this year end. We need to be discussing, but also acting together on this.
Jean-Simon, Sylvain mentioned digitization, which I believe would sort of be more in your bailiwick. So talk a little bit from your experience about, are you seeing much of an interest in cross-border collaboration, or in sort of, back to this question of should we view this primarily as sort of city by city competition attracting talent and companies, or is there really more of a role for collaboration, in particular, like I said, border collaboration?
Yeah, and I think it's a bit of a bad news for that strategy of the city, this city against this city, because we on our side we see that breaking down, right? We see now, like, yes, we have right now an ecosystem in Montreal, and it's great, and it's been serving us very well. But what about we expand that ecosystem, all over the place? So we've done a co-research with the NREL in Colorado. Now we're putting one with the Lawrence Berkeley Lab. We just signed one with a big university in Australia. We were on the World Economic Forum, one of the roundtable about how do you apply AI to the energy, more specifically the electricity distribution problem. And what we're finding out is the bottleneck is not so much the technology or coding, a line of code, but it's the creativity bottleneck that I call. So what do you want to do with the technology? What problem do you want to resolve, and how are you going to resolve it? And finding the angle, is that what I call that creativity bottleneck? And when we're talking with, let's say, a electrical company in Germany, they are having pretty much the same problem we're having here in North America, and they've been trying to find solution. And when you start to merge what they learn with what we learn together, suddenly you're seeing things, right? And you're starting to see that path where you should basically start coding in that direction. So this is how we're going to save the planet, like creating that global ecosystem of collaboration. Because as Sylvain said, I mean, we're out of time. We don't have like 30 or 40 years just to figure it out. We maybe have like 10 years. So every day matter, right? Let's code, let's move, let's work together, and it's happening. It is happening, and it's fascinating to see.
So, Juliana, I have a question for you, sort of about guess you could say, this new Zoom era where we're all doing so much digitally because right now we have to because of the pandemic. Do you find that that is facilitating, sort of this more collaborative, both in terms of development, but also you obviously have a background with the VCs. Are you seeing that, enhancing the ability to do, collaborations in multiple locations? And do you think that we're sort of now pivoting to that as a go forward, as opposed to going to get back to our old ways once we're sort of free and clear of the pandemic?
I really believe that there's no way to go back. There's a new normal, and this new normal is basically connected. I remember a lot of VCs at the beginning of the pandemic saying, like, I would never invest in a company where I haven't met the team personally. And now people are more than okay with doing it. And they don't want to go back. So now we have, I'm part of the board of the Angel Capital Association, the umbrella association for angel networks and early stage funds in North America. And everybody's talking about cross-border investing, because now you have groups of investors you trust at different parts of the world. They can be there. You can trust them that they're going to be following up on the investment, that they're going to do a good due diligence. And, everybody wants to invest globally. So, the problems are global. The companies have a global outlook. Diversity pays, diverse teams outperform non-diverse teams at least by 25% in terms of ROI. So adding this diversity angle, and it doesn't have to be even in one city, just by connecting the dots between cities is key. And the fact that Montreal has this traceability component is also key, because there's no way, I think, in terms of innovating for climate tech, we've done quite a lot on the supply side of the energy things, but then what about the demand? I think that's so easily empowered. A lot of customers out there, they want to do the right thing, but they are not empowered because they don't know how to make the right choices. Why? Because they don't have access to the right information. What if, we went to a supermarket and now you have the ingredients of one thing, you see if it's fair trade or not. But if you have the carbon footprint of how much it costs in terms of carbon to put this product on the shelf, don't you think that people would actually pay a premium to lower the carbon footprint? Many would do, but it's impossible now because, they are not empowered to do that. And I think mixing AI, making sure that everything also with traceability gets back to putting all the sustainable finance out there. In many cases, all the carbon footprint was an externality when we made a lot of decisions. The big oil and gas companies only I think a year ago have put the price of carbon into their ROI calculations. Those are no longer externalities. The insurance companies are very aware of the effects of climate change. So let's make sure that we all empower everybody, because every single decision counts. And I think that you can only do it in a networked economy.
Yeah. And I think a title I love from an article recently was, if you don't have a climate plan, you don't have a business plan. So those externalities have been sort of pushed aside for too long, and they're catching up because we're talking about finite resources. These are not infinite resources. And as we've seen the risk, that point of the insurance company, the pension funds also were some of the first to decarbonize, because they have actuaries that are working on 40 years, 50-year scenarios in terms of planning. But now we have a much shorter window. We're living it day to day. And the challenge of mitigation is huge. And I want to reach to that second point, because I think we can put some of the toothpaste back in the tube, but not all. So we'll have to work on adaptation, right? So when we talk about climate, we talk a lot about, and this is why I prefer climate to clean tech, right? So clean tech is more about the energy production and the types of energy, but there's also the consequences of climate change that we have to manage. And it's been interesting to see which are the more progressive society that are upfront and looking at people. So you can't separate the planet and the people. They're two sides of the same coin, and we're in the same ecosystem. in this sense, not a business ecosystem, but the global, the world ecosystem, the biodiversity. And we need to take care of that. So today we might be talking more about carbon, but water, we need to be really cautious with what happens with water, with air. And so this is both at the same time a fantastic challenge, but it's also scary, right? So this is what we need to work together too. It's reassuring to hear that you're working on it in Houston, that someone's working in it in Madrid or in Paris or in London, or we're going to have the COP26 a bit later this year.
Someone mentioned diversity, and I guess that leads me to sort of pivoting to a slightly different question. What's your sort of, for you that are actually in Montreal, what's your thoughts on with Montreal being French heritage? Is that a strength? Is that a way to pivot into Europe and other places for global collaboration? Is that just talk about that for a moment.
Simon, I'll let you start.
Yeah. I was not sure if you want to go. Yeah, I would not say French. I say, yeah, of course, French, but I would say like it's kind of a mix of European culture and US culture, right? So we kind of took a lot of the culture of the US to execute this logistic business. We need to create value. Time is the essence. Let's move, create business. But at the same time, we took that heritage culture from Europe, which is kind of colliding, right? And it's mixing every day. And I think it's maybe, and I've not done any PhD on it, but maybe the root of the creativity you see in Montreal, because there's a lot of creativity in Montreal. You see it in the video game. I think in terms of the post-prod, you see that in Montreal, but think of the Cirque du Soleil. There's a lot of creativity in different form that you find in Montreal. So that is, I think, one of the secret weapon of Montreal, that creativity that we sometimes put into a business model, and we create a lot of value, and of course we make money with it. So I think that is the root cause, is that mix of we're mixing all of the good stuff from the US with all of the good stuff of Europe, and we're making a unique sauce. Yeah.
And I'd say even broader than that. I think this is something Montreal shares with Toronto and Vancouver and other Canadian cosmopolitan cities. We're immigration cities. This country was built on immigration, largely. I'll come back to that in a moment. But the fact that there's connections all over the world, both in and out, that's true for business, but that's true for culture, right? The joke in Canada is that we're not so great at soccer/football, but there's always, when it's the World Cup or the Euro, there's always a neighborhood that is winning, because we have the world is in our city. So you just have to find, are we going to Italy because Italy is winning now? That's where the party is at. That's the other thing about Montreal. But I also want to recognize that being a minority, being Francophones and French-speaking in North America has created also something really strong, and has created some bonds with the First Nations, right? So Quebec was one of the first provinces to recognize some of the rights of the First Nations, because we were working ourselves on this idea of, are we independent, or are we going to separate? I think in 2021, we're more interdependent than independent. I think interdependence is a better theme, but there's something there about defining your own path. And this sort of like independence, or there's a reason why independent music was so big in Montreal. It's sort of like the same spirit. And I always thought that the independent music scene was a great inspiration for the startup scene. So be your independent business. Don't be don't just work for the incumbent. So I think that's culturally, that certainly adds to it.
And we kind of relate to Texas on that, right? That independent spirit, which is great.
So I think in a moment we're gonna see if there's anyone that has any of the guests might have a question, but I want to sort of ask sort of for you to briefly answer this question, if you don't mind. So for those of you in Montreal, what would be your message to someone running a tech company in Texas or somewhere else in the U.S., what is it that they don't know about Montreal that you'd want to tell them? And I'll ask Juliana the sort of question of if someone is running or an investor in Canada that is an investment or operations in Texas, what is it that they don't know? And Jean-Simon, since you're on my screen at the moment, I'm gonna ask you to go first.
I think we say in French, la joie de vivre. So we like to enjoy life. We work hard, but we play hard, and I think that's something you need to know. And we're great people. I mean, I'm not going to go into all the food stuff, right?
Yeah, I would say it's easier than you think. That's one thing I realized. There's a lot of regulation that has been harmonized in the last few years, especially on the fiscal and the legal side for doing business cross-border. There's still some tensions in where things are built and where they're distributed, but we need to tackle these challenges together, and it's easier to start. I'd say and we have example of we didn't mention, Laurence didn't mention that, but there's several international organizations also that are headquartered in Montreal. So this Montreal is a great city to be in, but it's also a great city to connect with the rest of the world. And I think that combination of it's easy to start and easier than you think, plus it opens you much more, is kind of a fantastic combo.
I may jump in, Doug. I'll try to actually just follow up on what Sylvain just mentioned, because it's true that it's not something that is very well known, but Montreal and Quebec in general is a really business friendly place. It's really easy to set up shop. It's I mean, you can register in a company in 48 hours. It's really simple. And you asked a question earlier about the French language, and there's a stat I really like, actually. It's the stat that there are more English speakers in Montreal than in Vancouver, actually, because most of the population is bilingual in Montreal. So this is a stat. So French is definitely, I mean, we are French capital. We're proud of it, but we do speak English. We can do business in English, and it's not something that should refrain investors or companies that want to collaborate with Montreal organizations, basically, because it's really easy. And Sylvain mentioned it, and Jean-Simon as well. But I think we're really open to collaboration, and that's what needs to be said, basically.
So for Houston, I would say that, we have so many similarities to Montreal. I think we are also, one of the best kept secrets in terms of the city, what it has to offer in terms of arts, in terms of, quality of life, a lot of good salaries and much lower cost of living than New York or the West Coast. We're also the foodie capital of the US. And, a little bit the same thing in terms of not only how diverse we are. I think we might be like maybe the fourth or fifth, city where you have the most Spanish speaking persons in the US, because there's a huge Hispanic community, but also a huge Francophone community. And, you also have our little Chinatown and our, Vietnamese places. And so it's pretty diverse. And that's why many companies that had a very strong presence in Silicon Valley, many of my friends who have been investors in funds and run funds are actually moving to Texas and either to Houston or to Austin, because, the pace is a little less frantic, and then the cost of living really makes up for the full, commute. And now that everything is becoming virtual, the case for moving to Texas is even stronger. So definitely less hype and bubble in terms of valuations for companies here, which of course could be a strong point for many VCs looking to invest in companies that are really tackling the biggest world challenges.
I like to sum it up. I say entrepreneurs that are ambitious and humble. It's a great combo.
Humility, yeah. I think one of the things that Houston doesn't know how to do well is sell ourselves well, you know, but I think once you come to Houston, you don't want to leave.
Very good. I want to thank the panel for being here today, as well as all the viewers. We will have this recording on YouTube for posterity, and I think Tobias McFall may have some closing comments about the chamber.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you to everybody for staying today. I really appreciate it. We'll announce the date of our next tech destination in the series shortly. We do have our, I mentioned OTC, the Offshore Technology Conference. We are doing an in-person event on August 16th, Monday, August 16th, which is the opening day night. It's an evening event. Please, through our website, there's information there where you can RSVP, and if you have any of our emails, you want to reach out and we can get you connected there as well. And then small little housekeeping. I did fail to mention a couple of names. Blake's Canadian Lawyers, also on our advisory board panel. They are both on our group advisory board in Canada and the US as Canadian lawyers. Also, Kingsbury Global is in our Dallas group. And our first worldwide alignment member, which is Bechtel, worldwide engineering project leader. We appreciate their support. And that's it. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you all.
Bonsoir.
Thank you very much.
Thanks all. Au revoir.
Merci.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.